How did she evade so many regulatory, so many governing bodies to even get a product that has never been proven to work on the market?
It sidestepped the law.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Hair X Friends We Got This podcast, where we share our thoughts on the pharmacy profession, experiences as healthcare providers, and explore our identities as two women of color going after it all.
As we share our stories, we hope you laugh, maybe cry, and feel inspired as you get to know us. Because at the end of the day, remember, friends, we got this.
We got this.
Yes.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, hi, everyone. Introduction
times. My name is Thu.
Hi, everyone. My name is Saley, formerly Sally. I answer to both, y'all. I answer to both, but I'm definitely stepping into my Saley era.
Saley era. Woohoo! Yes. We are excited to have you, Saley. And let's just get started with this episode.
Girl.
What's going on?
I don't know. I need you guys to just take in right now how Thu's dressed. I wore black, but this is like I'm showing up today as the H&M version of the person we're talking about. And Thu is showing up today as Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Versace. Like, she really is embodying the story she's going to share with us today. I just love that energy from her so much. I do.
I mean, if I really wanted to embody the true story, my voice would have to be like this. But I can't do that. Can anyone guess what I'm doing?
I was going to ask you, I was like, are you going to change your voice? Please do it.
That's wild. So if you haven't guessed already, and for those of you who are not watching on YouTube and don't know what Saley is talking about, I am wearing a black turtleneck. I do have red lipstick on. Yes. I'm channeling the original girl boss herself, Miss Elizabeth Holmes, today, because today's episode is going to be our second ever pharmacy and true crime episode. And it's going to be about Theranos.
Theranos, guys. And it's going to be a complicated episode. And please don't come for me if you hear me geeking out and kind of... We're going to try to separate the person from the behavior. We're going to try today. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Let me not say we. I am going to try. I think Thu today is... She's showing up to just serve it up straight up for you with what had happened was.
Yes, I'm just going to give you the facts, and then I will let you guys choose what it is that you believe in. You know, are you an Elizabeth Holmes secret fan? Which, by the way, if you're an Elizabeth Holmes fan, try not to be so out about it, because I feel like you're going to get judged. You're going to
get judged out here.
Yeah. But before we jump into that, I just want to preface first things first. I compiled let's see, how many pages there? 11 pages of research. So it's going to be a long episode. That's why we're diving right into it, because I don't think we have time for the chit chats.
Yeah.
But if you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe and write in the comment below. Are you secretly a Holmesy? Or whatever the fangirl, this, like the Swiftie version of
Elizabeth Holmes.
Are you or are you not? Let us know. But make sure that you are subscribed and comment and like and share and do all that fun stuff. If you are listening to us, please rate and write a review. Let the people know why we are the best companion for when you're walking your dog, doing the dishes, or just chilling. Because we're fun and you want to hang out with us.
We are fun. We are fun. Fantabulous over here. Listen,
fun times.
We want to continue to build the community, continue to bring you content, information, entertainment, stories that you care and feel inspired about. And for that, we need you to engage with us. So please do what Thu said. Thank you.
Yeah, do what I say. Okay, so let's get back to Theranos, right? So there's so much information already out there about Theranos. I feel like the media is kind of obsessed with this woman, and I understand why, because this is a fascinating story. Now, for me, in a way, I do see, this woman's a hustler, and we got to respect a little bit of that hustler mentality, right? But there's also a very interesting thing going on with her where she could also be a pathological liar
Yeah, low-key
and
socio.
a little bit of a sociopath, maybe.
A
I mean,
little bit.
a little, just a and so it's really hard for me to understand. Like, it's hard for me to relate to her sometimes.
Yeah.
At the same time, I'm like, okay, I guess, it's a very conflicting feeling for me.
Mm-hmm.
But because this is Pharmacy and True Crime, which is a new series that we're hoping to do maybe once a quarter,
Yeah.
the reason why I picked Theranos is because there's a huge component of healthcare in it that I want to dig in a little bit deeper because of all of the information that's already out there. Most of the content out there is focusing on Elizabeth Holmes herself, the company, the
Yeah.
fraud.
Yeah.
But I feel like what's missing is the healthcare provider perspective of
100%.
how did she
Yeah.
evade so many regulatory, so many governing bodies to
Yeah.
even get a product that has never been proven to work on the market? That is the
Can you
part that
imagine?
I'm more curious about than anything because I've already consumed everything there is to know about the woman herself. But now I'm looking at how did she even achieve this, right?
How did it happen? I mean, this is the biggest question of all. And even though she's extensively covered, this question continues to elude us. Like, we cannot have a clear answer to the how.
Oh, I have a clear answer for you.
You do. And I can't wait because all of what I have consumed about her, that part, I just feel like I don't have a grasp on it. I don't have a grasp on the how she pulled it off. And let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
Okay. If you figured out the how,
oh, I figured it out.
You can help us get a grip today, once and for all.
Yes. So it's gonna be a roller coaster, and I hope you guys all buckle up. All right,
I'm ready.
You ready? Let's go. So, by the way, I have so many different links and resources that I had to read and use. So I'm gonna put it all down in the description comment section because I can't be like, oh, from this article, and then I read the excerpt. I just gotta like go through it because it's gonna take forever. So check out in the description section, all the other links and things like that. But we're gonna go all the way back into the time machine to 2004, where Holmes drops out of Stanford to pursue Theranos. So,
boss.
Okay, good Lord.
I'm gonna calm down.
All right. So now we all know, I mean, for many of us, I'm sure we all know who Elizabeth Holmes was. And I think, again, I mentioned there's so much information about her already. So please go read the book called Bad Blood or even the podcast called The Dropout to get even more information about her. So I'm just going to do a quick summary of everything. Elizabeth Holmes was a sophomore studying chemical engineering at Stanford University. She drops out of school to pursue her startup Theranos, which she founded in 2003 at the age of 19. Oof. So Theranos is a combination of the word therapy and diagnosis. And the purpose, I mean, she had many ideas throughout the company, but it eventually became the idea that the company would be able to offer blood tests that would require only a finger prick. So almost like a little bit of a drop of blood that could run up to 30 tests within hours using the company's own lab testing instrument called the Edison. We'll talk more about everything, so don't you worry, but remember the name Edison machines, right? Yeah. And so she would pitch this product to a lot of investors. And one of the ways that she would pitch it is to tell the story of an uncle who died of cancer. And her catchphrase was always that if this product exists, less people will have to say goodbye too soon. That's like this thing that she would say a lot during her pitches.
Tagline.
Her little tagline. In numerous interviews, she argued that this technology would be revolutionary, slashing costs in the $75 billion a year blood testing industry. Investors and media ate it all up. They're like, nom, 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 nom. They ate it all up. From the
How did they eat it up? You gotta I love that.
From the onset, Holmes was able to secure high profile investors,
Oh,
including
yeah.
Henry Kissinger,
Kissinger.
Betsy
Yeah.
DeVos, and Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah.
Theranos raised $6.9 million in 2004 and then $200 million in 2007.
Yeah.
And so this just comes to show that it's all about who you know,
Oh,
because these investors truly trusted their network to put the
yeah.
money into this company rather than vetting the actual product itself.
Yeah.
$200 million.
It's it's wild. Like the
Mhm.
names and the people that put up money for Theranos simply from a reference, like
Yeah.
someone that I trust says that she's the real deal. That's all I need to know. Here's the check. I find
Yes.
that so fascinating.
But
Like,
it's the truth. It's the way of the world. And I think we talk about pharmacists a lot where we really focus on our credentials and we focus
yeah,
on building our intelligence.
yeah,
But at the end of the day, the thing that is even more effective is networking and
networking.
knowing people. And so it's just very fascinating, that whole
Yeah.
concept. So now let's flash forward to 2009, where we introduce another, I would say, villain into the story. And I would like to introduce Mr. Ramesh Sunny Balwani. So
Sunny
Mr.
Balwani.
so Mr. Balwani is nearly 20 years her senior, met Holmes in 2002 on a trip to Beijing through Stanford University. He then became her informal advisor, and then the two are later revealed to be romantically involved. The two kept in touch after they met, and then ended up living together in 2005. In 2009, he guaranteed a 13 million personal loan to the company, and then he became their chief operating officer and president of the startup.
Yeah.
Their personal relationship was largely concealed from employees, investors, and business partners. He was a successful man prior to Theranos, having made $400 million selling his shares of a software development company before the dot-com bubble burst. Balwani joined Theranos in 2009 despite having no medical or science experience, and yet he's the president. Okay, you know what I mean? Sick. It is sickening.
I just I love the places you're choosing to right click on and insert your little commentaries. I love it. Continue. Continue, please.
His nickname was the Enforcer, and his presence led to a toxic work environment. The reason why the press focused so heavily on the romantic relationship, because it played a large role in the actual criminal trials later on. Spoilers. But I do want to introduce these two villains because they are kind of the initial characters that we know from a lot of these stories. All right. So that was in 2009 when Mr. Balwani was introduced to the company. Let's flash forward even a little bit further, 4 years down the road in 2013, where Holmes finally opens up about Theranos and announces Walgreens' partnership. So a decade after starting the company, Holmes takes the lid off Theranos and courts media attention in the same month that Theranos and Walgreens announced they've struck up a long-term partnership. By the way, I'm obviously reading from another article because I don't think I would ever write takes the lid off and courts media attention. I that's just not my my normal vernacular, but you know how these journalists goes.
I can't.
The first Theranos Wellness Center location opens in a Walgreens in Palo Alto, where consumers can access Theranos blood test. By this time, Theranos claimed that it had the technology to take blood from a simple, painless prick and run multiple tests on a tiny raindrop-sized sample. The sample would then be sent to a lab in a nanotainer and tested on Theranos' proprietary technology known as the Edison machines. Holmes said that the tests would cost about half of the current Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement rates for the tests. So I want you guys to remember this because this is a really important point, is that there are two things that we're talking about here in terms of the technology. There is a nanotainer, which is like this tiny little vial. And if you see her on like a magazine cover, she's always like holding it.
She's holding this thing.
Yeah.
That's her girl boss pose right there. Right there.
Exactly. And then there's also the lab itself, the technology, the Edison machines. So remember those two things because it comes into play when I try to explain how she evaded other regulatory bodies. Okay. So that was great. You know, congrats to her. Whatever. 2013 was when she started.
It's the undertone. Okay, yeah. I mean, she did that or whatever, but whatever. Moving right along.
Anyways, a year later, oh my gosh, Holmes is named one of the richest women in America by Forbes.
Yes.
Miss Holmes here is named she's named American's billionaire, and she is known to have, or she was, I guess, valued to have $4.5 billion.
B as in boy.
B as in boy.
B as in boy.
That is her
bus,
personal wealth. Yeah.
As in BS.
I know. Perfect.
As in bra. Okay. Like as in biatch. She is that rich.
Yes.
She is that rich at that point in time. And that Forbes feature is when I first meet her.
Okay, so perfect. You're right. Remember, this is also extremely important to remember. Yeah. 2014 was when she was valued at $4.5 billion. So remember that date and that number. Then, a couple of months later, in December of 2014, Theranos raised $400 million. Good Lord. They just keep raising money. Like, that's all they're doing. And then in the next year, July 2015, Theranos gets FDA approval for a herpes test. And this is their first and only approval for a diagnostic test. So I'm taking you up. You know how there's like a roller coaster? You kind of go up a little bit. And now you get to drop. Yeah. So we're climbing our way up, right? This is the roller coaster here. We're kind of at the peak. So it's time to drop.
It's time to drop. She's raising hundreds of millions of dollars. She's on Forbes list. She's invited to speak on stages where people like Hillary Clinton, Condoleezza Rice. Yeah. I'm talking about women that are changing the world. She's speaking on platforms and stages alongside those people. And I don't think she's 25 years old yet.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it's wild because we're talking about, we are at the peak. I mean, we're talking about like December 2014 was when they raised $400 million. And then in July, they got FDA approval for their first test. So we're thinking like, okay, she's going up. There's absolutely no way that nothing can derail her.
Yeah.
Until October 2015, where everything just goes explosion, right? Like now we are literally in the decline. October of 2015 is when Theranos is the subject of a Wall Street Journal investigation. Mr. John Carreyrou enters the chat. He is an investigative reporter of the Wall Street Journal, and he published this explosive article about Theranos, essentially claiming that the company's revolutionary claims were overblown. Theranos had allegedly been collecting blood samples in traditional way, diluting them so that they could run on machines made by other companies and not using their Edison technology. So Ms. Holmes hits back, and she basically says that the journal's reporting is factually and scientifically erroneous. However, days later, Theranos halts the use of the nanotainer, which is that tiny little blood collection vials, for all of the herpes tests due to pressures from the FDA. And later that month, the FDA released 2 heavily redacted reports citing 14 concerns, including calling the company's proprietary vial as an uncleared medical device. So lots of things basically happened in this month that really exposed a lot of cracks in this company. But of course, she's got to come back. And so she hits back with this pretty infamous quote now. And this is what she said. Maybe I'll try to do a deeper voice, but she basically says, "This is what happens when you work to change things. First, they think you're crazy, then they fight you, then you change the world."
It's literally, it is a famous quote now. Like,
I think it's infamous.
Whether you love it, infamous. Excuse me. Please don't come for me. Please don't cancel me. Whether you loved her or didn't love her or whatever it is, that statement, first they think you're crazy, then they fight you, then you change the world. It is it is motivational. If
Yeah.
you are an inventor, if you are a creator, if you are a disruptor, an innovator, having it said in such very, very simple terms, it resonated. For me,
Yeah.
I'm like, that is true.
I mean,
Because
it resonates with me too, because in order for us both to do something that's really different from everybody else, you have to believe that what you're doing is worth the effort and time, even if nobody else agrees with you. Nobody else thinks that it's actually going to
100%.
be, it's going to work. You have to believe in it, and so this is the
Yeah.
stuff that you have to hang on to, and
Yeah.
this is
In
why.
fact, like you kind of have to come to terms with, yeah, people will absolutely straight up think you're crazy. Like
A
that's the
hundred
first
percent.
that's the
Yeah.
first thing. That's the first thing you become comfortable with, that no one sees what you see, and
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yes. Yes.
Right? So
Okay. I
that's
know.
that's that's as fangirly as I'm gonna get.
Yeah. Right. Oh no. It's gonna get worse. But
Who knows what's
anyways,
going?
so that was in October 2015. Next
Yeah.
month, November 2015, Theranos and Safeway partnership falls short. Theranos and Safeway relationships actually went back before Walgreens struck a deal with Walgreens, or Theranos struck a deal with Walgreens. Too many names, too many
Yeah.
companies. I'm getting confused here. Safeway, which invested it invested $350 million into building out clinics in hundreds of its supermarkets, eventually said no more to Theranos. But they lost essentially a giant chunk of money because of this partnership, which is so wild to me. They spent a lot of that building these areas where patients can come and get their blood tests, and now it's become more of like a consulting area for pharmacists, I think. But yeah, they really invested a lot of money into this
Money.
partnership.
Wow.
A couple of months later, January 2016, federal regulators take issue with Theranos' California lab. CMS then enters the chat, and then this is when Walgreens pulls back. So the Center of Medicare and Medicaid Services sends Theranos letter stating that the lab is not in compliance with the Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendments of 1988. CLIA,
Yeah.
it comes back, baby.
You
Um,
we maybe we're teaching you things here too now. Maybe.
exactly. Essentially, CMS says it's going to give Theranos 10 days to address the issues that they found. If
Oh
not,
wow.
consequences is going to happen. In response, Walgreens says it will not send any lab tests to Theranos California lab for analysis and suspends Theranos services at its Palo Alto Walgreens location. Several months after that, March 2016, CMS threatens to ban Holmes and Balwani from the lab business. May of 2016, Balwani steps down. Theranos voids 2 years of blood tests. June of 2016, Holmes net worth is now, can you guess how much she's worth now?
At least one B as in boy.
So in June of 2016, Holmes' net worth revised to $0.
Stop it.
$0. 2 years after they said that she was worth $4.6 billion. Do you understand this? The significant drop. Like, this is mind blowing.
Okay, but wait, pause. So the female version wanna be Steve Jobs. My net worth was higher than her net worth in 2016.
I mean, she's worth nothing. Literally. I'm surprised that it's not negative dollars, actually.
Stop it.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my
She lost
gosh.
everything basically
Everything,
within
quite
1 year.
literally.
1 year. That's all it takes. Theranos loses its largest retail partner at this time too. Walgreens ends its partnership with the company and says it will close all 40 Theranos wellness centers. And then
Wow.
in July 2016, CMS banned Holmes from running labs for 2 years. So we're dropping, we're descending, right? But
it's
we have
like,
not reached the bottom yet. We have not reached the bottom. So are you
oh
strapped
my,
in? Let's strap us all in.
oh,
Because a couple of months later, Theranos investors sues the company. Theranos downsizes. A month after that, Walgreens sues Theranos. Several months after that, more layoffs followed by the failed lab inspection. And then a couple of months after that, Theranos settles with CMS and the Arizona Attorney General. So Theranos settles with CMS agreeing to pay $30,000 and to not own or operate any more clinical labs for 2 years. Theranos also has to settle with the Arizona Attorney General over allegations that its advertisements misrepresented the method, accuracy, and reliability of the blood test, and the company was out of compliance with federal regulations governing clinical lab testing. Theranos agrees to pay $4.5 million back to Arizona consumers as part of the settlement deal.
Wow.
So it's just one thing after another. It was nonstop. It was just literally like boom, 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 boom. Yeah. Lawsuits galore. So let's take a quick break right now because we're pretty much done. We're at the end of the roller coaster. We've reached the end. Theranos is basically no more. Elizabeth Holmes is literally $0 worth. And yeah, what do you think so far? What do you think of this whole roller coaster experience?
I cannot imagine it. I cannot imagine it because she had done it. She had done it. Like she'd shown girls, little girls everywhere, what is possible if you're audacious.
Mm-hmm.
And we later found out that she was also hella delusional.
Oh gosh, I know.
But she had done it. Like it was similar to the Oprah moment, right? First billionaire in media. Like when someone ascends to what she was able to do, what she did, we're not talking about the how. I want to be clear here. I'm not talking about how she did it. I'm talking about what she actually accomplished on fraudulent and whatever else it was.
Mm-hmm.
But to have gotten to where she got, it put a lot of heart and fire in many girls' bellies because, again, to me, looking at that, all of that before the age of 25, it emboldened me. Like it really, really did. And I can't not admit that. Like I can't not admit that.
Okay.
That's where I'm at because all of the other evil stuff, I'm able to see it's evil.
Yeah.
It's evil. Just like the whole Elizabeth Holmes thing, like I get so fired up about it because I have never, ever, ever, ever cared about Forbes magazine before her. But to see her on that cover, it was the whole thing. And to think that no one was paid for her to show up the way she did, the black, the red lipstick, the very simple aesthetics, because she didn't want to think about what she wore every day. So her whole closet was like black turtlenecks. But this is stuff I learned after. But to look at her there, she wasn't done up. She just stood there, right? With her little thing. And she wasn't 25 years old. It put like a different belly, like fire in my belly and all the things that were living in my head as far as like my creativity and what I wanted to create and what I wanted to do. I'm just mad that like she went and f***ed it all up.
We'll beep it out.
Beep it out. You didn't have to F it up. You didn't have to do what you did. And there were people that saw it early that wanted to reel it in and she wouldn't allow them in. And as early as a Harvard professor that saw her at 19 and could recognize the potential and the vision, the wisdom, she had all of it. She spoke Cantonese by the time she was 15 years old. Like she was, and she is, excuse me, I'm not going to kill the woman with my tongue, but she is a very impressionable young woman. And the ambition, it got a hold of her in a way that I think it turned evil because I can't rationalize what's going on in your mind when you decide to falsify lab results, when you decide to get in front of the world and lie and hit them with the fake it till you make it. Like, what?
But I think there's a lot of information out there though that says Silicon Valley, that's how they breed their startup owners, you know?
Yeah.
It's the idea of like you should promote your product in a way that may seem overblown, but that is just kind of how it goes, unfortunately. And you are putting yourself at very much of a risk there. The problem, though, is when you use Silicon Valley's techniques with healthcare, that's where it's
Healthcare.
very dangerous because
Oh,
you're now talking about afflicting a potential harm on so many innocent people. It's not just
people.
like, oh, we created this phone. Oops, it doesn't work. Now you're talking about we created a diagnostic test that could potentially lead to so much patient harm. So
Yeah.
as much as we can feel inspired by somebody who has so much ambition, because like
Yeah.
you and I are both women who are wanting to create something. We want to see that exist in the world because it inspires us and gives us the fire and the ambition to go to do it too. But we
Yeah.
have to acknowledge where this person has completely failed. And it's a huge
Failed.
part of it is because,
Epically.
yeah, a huge
Epic,
part of it is that
epic,
you cannot
epic
be
fail.
applying a tech mindset with healthcare. It just doesn't
Healthcare.
work very well. Like there has to be some sort of compromise in between. But
No.
I know that you're fangirling right now, but
I'm
let's
over it.
I'm going to give you some examples, some patient impact stories that
Yeah.
is going to completely destroy any kind of positive
Mm,
feelings that you may have.
oh
And I'm
no,
going to save the worst one for last.
my fangirling over Elizabeth Holmes is with a very, very realistic lens. Like
Yeah.
I know that atrocities happened. Like
Mhm.
and that's what I'm saying, that if you've pinpointed the how, because the why, I think I have kind of figured it out and he made it no better. There is no excusing, no explanation for why these people went through what they went through for what,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, so at its peak, Theranos operated at 40 centers inside Walgreens stores in the Metro Phoenix area and sold
Wow.
more than 1.5 million blood tests that yield 7.8 million test results for nearly 176,000 consumers. So Theranos touched a
Insane
lot
for
of patients.
people. Yeah.
Some of the patient impacts includes this is one of the first patient that took the stand in the trial of former Theranos CEO Elizabeth Holmes and said that the company's blood test inaccurately showed that she was suffering a miscarriage when in fact she had a healthy pregnancy. Isn't that so scary? So, this is a woman that had had multiple miscarriages in the past. And so, when she finally got pregnant, she went to the Theranos Wellness Center. She took an HCG test, which measures the pregnancy hormone. And the test showed that her number was too low. And so, her nurse practitioner, seeing the results, said that you may have a miscarriage, when in fact, she did not. She had a healthy pregnancy at the time. Another patient, Erin Tompkins, testified that in May of 2015, she tested positive for an HIV antibody following a Theranos blood test in Arizona.
Yeah.
And of course, was emotionally devastated. She then
Absolutely.
took several more tests to show that she did not have HIV. But
Having.
you
Oh
will
no, no,
always
no, no,
have
no,
this
no.
idea in the back of your head, like, but what if? But what if I do?
Listen,
You
when
know?
when you have something like that happen to you, you lose trust in the healthcare system.
Oh,
And I
100%.
think that that's what was grossly underestimated, the impact of falsifying results or not doing it the way you said you were doing it and getting people false positives and false negatives. The impact that it has is that that person, even if this error is corrected, that person moves forward the rest of their lives,
Mm-hmm.
second guessing every single result that's ever going to come their way again. And I don't blame them. In fact, if you don't live like that, I would think something is wrong with you.
Yeah,
After you experience something like this,
it's traumatic.
you go on the rest of your life, and probably the rest of anyone that was close to her that watched her go through that ordeal, they will
Yeah.
always seek second opinion or repeat exams.
Always. It's
And
terrifying.
it's horrible.
The
It's
last
awful.
the last one is going to really like fire you up. It's going to make you upset. So I apologize in advance, everybody. But this is going to make pharmacists very upset. specifically, but in Peoria, a resident, Steve Hammonds, visited a Theranos clinic 5 times between September and October of 2015 to monitor the results of a blood thinning drug. And I'm assuming this INR.
Oh,
5 times. Based on the results of those tests, a doctor ordered him to discontinue warfarin and switch to another agent. So you can kind of imagine what the INR results was probably doing. It was probably up and down, up and down, up and down, but
left and right. Can't get it to stabilize.
Can you imagine the fact that because the test results were so inaccurate that this person's INR probably is fine, but having to take maybe a lower amount or a higher amount of warfarin continuously for these 5 times that they went to get the test results, and then eventually was like, okay, maybe warfarin's not the right drug for you, switch to a different one. But that is so dangerous. For those of you who may not have ever managed warfarin, we use a lab test called INR to determine whether warfarin is working for the patient. Warfarin's a blood thinner, so it helps prevent clots, whether it be strokes or maybe a pulmonary embolism, a clot in the lungs, or maybe in the legs. And if you don't have the right dose for the patient, they could either clot more, so they can develop another clot, which can then kill them, or they can bleed out, which then kill them.
Also kill them.
It's not a medication that you can just like, oh, whatever. It's a very dangerous medication used for very intense indications. Yeah. This is not something that you play around with. This is something that can be life or death.
Yeah.
And this person went
literally, like, and that's not a euphemism.
No,
like
it is life or death.
She's not saying that like to make a point, but the point is that it really and truly could kill them if they end up on any side of those two extremes.
Yeah, if the blood is too thick, if it's too thin, you could kill somebody. It's extremely dangerous. It's extremely serious. And yet this man went to the clinic 5 times because obviously the results were just giving them crazy numbers. And thank goodness now we do have alternatives to warfarin, but there are particular indications that cannot be switched to a different blood thinner. So like if you have any kind of valve, like
valve replacement.
A valve replacement, you cannot be on a different medication. You have to be on warfarin. Can you imagine? That is so dangerous. That when I read that, my stomach drops because I can imagine how scary and difficult that is for the patient and the providers themselves. It's really, really scary. So
I remember when I listened to Dropout, one of the patients they featured on the Dropout podcast had a result that said that she had cancer.
Yeah.
When in fact, she did not. And the point here, I'm sorry, like if I'm getting like all fired up or whatever, because it's just as a person who's grown up in the healthcare system, I have never asked for a second opinion. And there are some other people in my, the chronic kidney disease community that think I'm insane for never asking for a second opinion. I am a person that really trusts my providers and their expertise. I really shouldn't, for all of the things that I have seen and all of the things I've experienced as a pharmacist, where I'm reading a result and I'm like, say what now? Can we repeat that? But I'm just like, oh, it is? I'll be right there. Right?
It's interesting because in pharmacy school, I don't think we've ever been told like, oh, you should double check a lab test. Like that initial result may not be correct. I mean, whenever I get like a vancomycin level back and if it's abnormal, I call the nurse, I call the lab, I call everybody to make sure everything was done correctly, to make sure that I can trust that result.
Yes.
Because, you can't just always believe everything that's given to you face value like that. You have to use your critical judgment in any of this. And this is that gray area in healthcare.
It is. I live by like a little motto as a pharmacist. I'm low-key vibrational paranoid. I'm paranoid that I don't know what I'm doing. I'm paranoid that I'm going to hurt a patient. 1000%. But this forces me to tune into what I am doing. It forces me to be extra vigilant about every little decision I make in my patient care. So I love that low vibrational paranoia. The second thing, I practice and precept and teach by two things: trust, but verify. I don't care if you've been a cardiac surgeon before my parents met. If you're saying something and I'm like, that's interesting, I'm going to go verify what you're saying because I'm like, I've literally never heard that. I've never heard anyone do it that way. I've never seen it done that way. What article? Do you have an article I can read to get better insight on that? Like, it's not to challenge you, but it's just because as a pharmacist, for me, trust, but verify. Now, you may be wondering at this point why that doesn't translate into my own healthcare. Why don't I verify my own providers? I don't know. I've known them since I was 15.
But
We're
I
like
think I do
family.
the exact same thing though. I really do like, oh, you think I should go get that test? All right. Okay, I trust you.
But
Yeah.
Theranos is proof that we should really ask questions.
Ask question. I know. It's just because I think what it is when you're the patient, you just want somebody to give you the answer. You just
I
don't
know.
want to have to, like, you're already scared that you have
Yes,
this thing. You just want somebody to just tell you how to get better. I don't think that you want to have to do that extra work, even though really at the end
absolutely.
of the day, you should. I understand it. I get it.
I do. I do
Completely.
too.
But,
It's hard. It
yeah.
continue. I know you have more.
I do have more. So in March 2018, Holmes is charged with massive fraud. So we can kind of
Oof.
pause all on that right now
Yeah.
and just dive into what the F actually happened. Like
Happened.
how did this happen, right?
How? Help me.
Yes. And the fraud part is like, okay, I get it. Like you lied about your product, sure. But like you would imagine though that if a random person like Sally and I, we just like show up one day, we're like, hey, we got this thing that's gonna save everybody's lives. You would think though that like there will be regulatory bodies and at least like governing bodies to step in and protect consumers from even being exposed to this random product that we're like, it's gonna work, everybody, you know, especially when you're making really wild claims. But in Theranos' case, that didn't really happen. And so I think that we should all be a little bit paranoid about the fact that anybody could find out some of these loopholes in the laws and put out products
Wild.
that may not work.
It's
So
wild.
I'm going to go ahead and explain to you how this all went down. Now, this is a cautionary tale for anyone listening that there are many ways that greedy, desperate people can go around the system to get what they want.
Oh
And we need to
boy.
be very aware of that. Um, so, in order for Theranos to accomplish its goals, there are two regulatory bodies that it needs to address. So, Theranos needs to navigate its way through two separate and distinct sets of regulations of two very different federal healthcare agencies. One of them is the FDA, and the FDA is the pathway to market. And the other one is CMS, and CMS is for the payment of the testing services, right? So there's FDA and then there's CMS. Now, before we get started, me diving into all of that technical terms, Saley, do you remember what the nanotainer is? Let's remind everybody. What is the nanotainer?
Nanotainer. I don't recall.
Nanotainer is the tiny vial, like the blood vial, right?
I just always called it the little thingy.
So the nanotainer is the little thingy that we put our
that she's posing with. That she's always posing with.
So everybody remember that. And then the other product is the laboratory process itself, including the Edison's device. So those are really important for us to be able to apply into what I'm going to be talking about today. So let's talk about the FDA first. The FDA is it regulates the pathway to the market, and in this case, through the medical device amendments, it regulates manufactured products' pathway to the market. So it regulates medical devices essentially. So in Theranos' case, the FDA regulates. The FDA is the regulatory body to determine if the nanotainer meets the requirement to be on the market. Now, in terms of the pathway to the market, the FDA classifies a lot of the different medical products into three classifications. The first class is one that is the least control, and the device that would be classified as class 1 device would be things for labeling or recording, information, or notifying for repairs, replacement. So very basic stuff, like stuff that really doesn't require a lot of control. Class 2 medical device requires additional special controls such as performance standards, special labeling requirements, post-marketing surveillance, patient registries, and guidelines. So it requires a lot more evidence to support its use. And then we won't get into class 3, but class 3 requires even more regulations. Now, freaking Theranos decides that it's going to be like, well, the nanotainer is a class 1, guys. Sorry, but it's class 1. Hee hee. And so Theranos goes on to wrongly claim that its nanotainer collection vial was a class 1 medical device when it should have been a class 2. The FDA, following an inspection, cited Theranos in a form 483 for improperly classifying the nanotainer as class 1 when it should have been a class 2. And so by classifying as a class 1, it really didn't have to provide a lot of evidence for the FDA to then get it to its way onto the market. I don't even understand why it could just be like, I'm a class 1 without anybody like checking on that though. And that's the part that I'm very confused about. Yeah, so I think that is question. I think that's one of the loopholes though that it found. But it wouldn't have worked if they hadn't found this second loophole within CMS. So CMS via the CLIA, so that's the 1988 Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendment that Saley talked about in one of our previous episodes. They are the ones to regulate laboratories, including systems and procedures, which is, in this case, it's the Edison's device. Yeah. So what happens though is that there is this part of CLIA where there are certain tests that are developed and used in a single laboratory, such as it's called a laboratory developed test, which is an LDT that does not require any pre-market review. So there is a class of tests that does not require any pre-market review, and it goes through a single laboratory. The intent of this LDT was to allow innovation of homebrew tests for specialized rare or low-risk testing that could not practically produce enough data to review by the FDA before market. And so actually a lot of our genetic tests are considered LDT because you essentially just like swab your cheeks, you send it in, and they run your DNA, and it's not even really for diagnostics purposes. It's just to know like where you're from. So like, who cares at that point? It's just for funsies.
Like, just to know like what you're made of. That's all.
Yeah, it's just to know what your dog's breed is. Like we don't need a lot of regulations behind that. So because of this particular loophole, you don't need to show the FDA or the CMS a lot of your technology prior to sending it into the market. And so what they did was that Theranos executives used trade secrets and its corporate dual roles as manufacturer of the test of the nanotainer and the owner of the clinical laboratory to classify the machine as an LDT. I don't want to say like I understood all of that completely, but basically because it owned both the nanotainer and the Edison machine, it was able to say this is an LDT and we don't need to show any pre-market data before it comes onto the market.
This sidestepped the law.
They kind of knew where the loopholes are, and they essentially used that to their advantage. So in doing so, the company thereby appeared to avoid disclosure of any information regarding assessment of its test clinical validations to investors, FDA, corporate partners, or academic institutions. And the article that I read, the authors of that article actually went and found that there were no data published by the company to support efficacy claims of the Edison's capability, and only one report of a peer-reviewed analysis of Theranos conducted test results, which were found significantly deficient. There was no evidence that this thing actually worked. And it still found its way onto the market because of all these loopholes.
And oh man!
But I'm not done.
There were all these internal. Are you going to talk about that? All these people that were scared for their lives, whistleblowers.
Oh, I'm going to talk about the whistleblowers in a bit. Okay. But yes, Theranos made it so. There is this dynamic in the company where everybody had to keep the secret. It was very secretive. It was basically like, you cannot talk to this person, you cannot talk to that person. It was a very toxic place to work. And it made it very intense.
It's like if Thu is doing visuals and I'm doing the recording, I'm not allowed to talk to her about what those visuals will eventually look like. Like we can't talk to each other to plan so that like that cross-functional collaboration that you normally see that companies would welcome, that was like not allowed at Theranos. It's like just do your part and send it to them.
Yes. Yes.
And that
don't
was
talk
it.
to anybody. Yeah.
Don't talk to anybody.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about the whistleblowers.
That would be my
sure.
cue to be like, I'm out. I'm not going to be here when the FBI comes and raids this place.
The FBI. I know, seriously.
I'm out.
Just like, yeah, walk yourself out the door. Yeah. I mean, the workplace was so toxic that I didn't put this in my document, but there are instances of even an employer or employee die by suicide because of how toxic everything was. I mean, I think that he was also struggling with this idea of like, I don't think our technology works, but then there's so much on the line for this company because there's so many investors that's put their money in it. Like the stress level and the pressure is quite intense for a lot of these workers, for sure. But I'm not quite done with how they evaded everything, because imagine like, let's say, yeah, sure, we were able to bypass FDA, we were able to bypass CMS, which are two extremely difficult things to do anyways. But how do you get yourself to be exposed to the consumers themselves, especially with a laboratory test like this? Because imagine if you want to check your vitamin D, typically you go to your doctor's office. They have to write a prescription, and then that gets sent to whatever lab that works with your insurance or work with your doctor's office. So in Arizona, Sonora Quest is a really large company that is partnered. It's deeply partnered, like deep connections with a lot of like health systems here. So if Theranos were to come to Arizona, which they did, how would they actually step in and say, don't use Sonora Quest, use us?
Yeah.
Because there's already such a deep connection. So now they have this almost like a competitor to kind of, compete against.
Yeah.
And so what Theranos basically did was like, instead of trying to work with doctors, trying to work with other healthcare entities, they decided to bypass all of that. They're like, no, not gonna do it. That's too much work. Like, instead, do you know what they did instead?
I don't know. I think we want to do it that way.
Do you know what they did instead?
What?
They decided just to change Arizona law. Duh.
Excuse me?
They're just like, I'm just gonna try to pass a bill, get it to fit our mission of the company. Yeah. They're like, screw this whole thing.
Wait.
We're just gonna go and make a bill and have it be passed through Arizona Senate and House of Representatives. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm thinking of, I'm trying to process what you're saying, but I'm also just thinking like, how many, I'm sorry, I didn't know this piece too, but how many, hey world, listen, I have something I want to say real quick. How many bills are there currently fighting their ways through legislature that is actually going to make people's lives better? And it actually will. Okay? How many? Like, how many pharmacists, prescriptive authority privileges are fighting their ways through different senates in different states right now and can't get it through? So pharmacists can help fight in their communities to decrease and eliminate HIV infections in their community. Those are fighting their ways in. But, oh, wait, hold up. Theranos, here they come. They can just get a bill passed so that their fraudulent device, their fraudulent device can come out here and tell women that they have miscarried but haven't, have cancer but don't.
Yeah. Isn't this so wild? They were like, no.
Whose trash can am I setting on fire? Real quick. I just need to know who's involved in this.
Let me tell you all about it. So this is an excerpt from a news article, and it follows this guy. His name is Tim Steller. He's a columnist. An Arizona columnist, and he basically tells the story of what happened that day. So the article says, a columnist, Tim Steller, who happened to be shadowing Arizona House Speaker David Goen that day, watched Holmes' entire full-court press unfold, from her arrival in a black SUV surrounded by bodyguards and lobbyists to impassioned speech she delivered to local lawmakers. Her goal was to create a free market competition to drive prices down and increase transparency. Stella recalls her saying as she rattled off the names of Theranos' renowned board members, including former secretaries of state Henry Kissinger, George Schultz. Sorry, George, I messed up your name. She told a sad story about her uncle who died of cancer, and Arizona Republican Governor Doug Ducey took the bait. So did Goen. So did Arizona's majority Republican House leadership. So this is what she says. Inherently, we've got a system which is by law saying you can only get these tests done at a cost that is affordable once you've already had the disease. And if they're not symptomatic, insurance won't pay for it. So people have to pay out of pocket, and paying out of pocket is insanely expensive. And that was kind of one of her arguments, essentially. Yeah. So the House Bill 2645, sponsored by Republican Heather Carter, would allow consumers to get blood tests directly from a licensed clinical laboratory without doctor's orders. So
hi, Heather. I want to talk to you, Heather.
So these people are just going into whatever labs and being like, I would like to get my vitamin D check. I would like to get my cancer lab works done without having to go through the doctors, without having to go through any kind of insurance or reimbursement process.
Wow.
So whatever the lab test offers to the public can go and get it. And I can still do that. I think this bill is still in existence to this day. So I can go into Sonora Quest and be like, I'd like to check my calcium levels just for funsies, whatever. And I can because of this bill. So Holmes' message has resonated with Arizona's legislature. She testified last week in support of the bill, which sailed through Arizona House without a single no vote. The bill has been assigned to the Arizona Senate Health and Human Services and then eventually got passed. Only one body opposed to this bill. The measure under consideration was the Arizona Medical Association. They actually opposed this bill.
So look at the AMA coming through over. Look at the AMA.
Well, like the Arizona's version, yeah. They're like, wait a minute, I don't think so.
I see you guys. Go ahead, AMA. Yeah. When you're awake at the desk, you do some good work. I tell you what.
But they said
I can see. But do you see like? Okay, you and I are entrepreneurs, right? Like yes. You and I are women in the business world. I want to claim that. I want to claim that.
We are.
But do you see the genius in what she did? She didn't come in and say, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. She came in and spoke to them about a problem. It's too expensive. We're not doing anything until people are actually sick. This is what's happening. We need to create competition. This is going to be good for the economy. It's going to be good for the patient. It's going to empower for patients' freedom and all this blah, 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 blah. And it's going to remove the barrier of care if the patient can't get in to see a primary care provider. Their pitch was great.
Her pitch is on point. Yeah.
The pitch is on point. They basically told this group of people, you have all these different problems. And let me put it in your face how big your problem affects the cost of healthcare in your state. And here's how we are going to step in and help with some of the
I mean, she said what they wanted to hear.
Yes.
But I know that you're giving her credit for it. At the same time, she's got Henry Kissinger. She's got George Schultz. And it's not just her showing up like this brazen woman. She's got all of these white men backing her up too.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if I can give her all the credit because she's got, secretaries of, former secretary of state. I would be like, sold. I'm done. If Henry Kissinger
or even Betsy DeVos, like that family and their legacy, right? And policies and politics and funding, right? Like
Yeah, it's about who you know. I don't think we
She
can give her two,
had the
like, but
formula.
this is why pharmacists, you said that in the beginning, we are trying to pass bills that are going to be really helpful for patient care, but that's the missing key, right? We
Yeah.
can say all that they want to hear, and we can give them this whole show, but if you don't have the backing of certain
Yeah.
people,
People.
sadly, it's just not gonna, it's just not how things work.
Yeah. You're
It's
not
just,
going anywhere really, really
yeah,
quickly.
I know.
What?
But I
I
do want to
can't believe
say,
they changed the
the law,
law.
baby. She went and changed
I
the law.
I
She
am
went big.
stuck. I am flabbergasted at that.
But
Like,
do you know why I know this though? It's because I was in pharmacy school when this whole thing was happening. So I was
yeah.
paying attention. But I imagine that most people didn't know that she went this far to pass a bill in in support of this Theranos venture. Yeah. She went big. She didn't go home. Um
She got sent home later.
Shit there.
She got sent home.
Okay, where was I? Oh yeah. So the Arizona Medical Association said this, sponsored by Representative Heather Carter, this bill was wired from start to finish thanks to the high-powered lobbying by lab juggernaut Theranos and backing by Speaker Gowan and Governor Ducey. So this was like, it was set to
Yeah.
pass.
It was, she
Yeah.
was just there for like
The
a
visuals.
decoration.
Yes, exactly.
Just,
Um, according to Stellar, this is going to upset you. According to Stellar, none of the legislators who met with Holmes that day bothered to ask whether her technology actually worked. It was eventually passed and signed into law by Governor Ducey, and he said, I want you to know I appreciate the partnership and investment Theranos has made in Arizona. Yikes, I hope he eats his word. Oh my God, look at her face. Sally, are you okay? Her face
what do
right now.
you mean they didn't ask if it works?
Yeah, she went back.
I heard nothing beyond that sentence, by the way.
They didn't ask. They didn't care.
But okay, wait. I've done
Oh,
enough advocacy on Capitol Hill with like all of my little health equity groups to know that all these lawmakers, they have a health legislative aide. They have somebody in their office who has their pulse on healthcare. So when these special interest groups, when pharmacists come and all these people come, when they don't have the time to meet, or even when they do, that health legislative aide is in that meeting to hear the patient's story, to hear our perspective, because that's the person that's going to later help them understand the implication on whatever committee they serve on. That's what makes this very problematic, that no one asked, does it work? Where were the health legislative
nobody
aides?
wants to ask. I mean, I think that they all just like believed from other people. They're like, there's no way that these
That
investors
she's
are
come
backing
this
up this
far.
company.
Yeah,
There's just like, and I can understand that to a degree of
I can
like,
see it.
yeah, like if
I can
hundreds and
see it.
millions of dollars are being raised for this company, of course it has to work. Like, and especially if you're in government and you may not be privy to what like the scientific process is supposed to be, maybe you just assume that there's already kind of like, like regulations that's being done. Like you would
Yeah,
also assume like the FDA and the CMS is like done and done before you would go
like,
on the market. You would assume like everything has been checked and done. So I
this is
can
crazy.
kind of see where this happened because it is so exciting. It's exciting to see innovation in your state. It's exciting to push
Yeah,
something like this. But
yeah.
unfortunately, I think Elizabeth, I feel like she probably knew, and that's
She
part of her
knew.
manipulation is she kind of knew
Yeah,
that that was going to happen.
strategy.
Mm, yeah.
Because like every time, like on the dropout, they spend a lot of time on Elizabeth the person. Without a doubt, she was keenly aware, keenly tuned in to her ability to get people to lean her way. Like she knew how to speak and who to speak to. And that's why, like, the professor at Stanford,
The woman,
the woman,
she was mad.
she was like,
She
she
did not
could
fall
see,
for it.
she
She
did not
saw
fall for it. And she could see it. She could see it. And she was like, oh girl, in a few more years, like what you're talking about may and but Elizabeth, she completely dissociated herself from her immediately because and then her fixation turned to
Yeah.
men,
Yes. But
right?
I don't know if her fixation necessarily turned to men. It's just that it worked better with
It worked
men.
better.
But
as
if
a
I actually watched an interview of that particular professor, the
professor.
female professor that Elizabeth initially went to,
Yeah.
who Elizabeth initially pitched her idea, and this female professor was like, "This isn't gonna work.
Yeah.
You're delusional, basically."
Yeah.
She essentially was doing an interview, and I remember her being like, "Yeah, I mean, men don't think they're with their brains." She said something to that effect, which she was like, "You know who believed in Elizabeth Holmes? White men."
Oh my
She was throwing
gosh.
shades. I love that woman. She's
Yeah,
hilarious.
right? She knew. Like
Yeah.
like she knew that she had a certain je ne sais quoi, and
Yeah.
she leveraged it fully. The old white man that had a lot of
But
money but wanted more.
see, I don't know if I could be like that. Like I almost feel like sure I know how to behave and act a certain way to get what I want.
Yeah.
But me as a person, I don't think that it would be very hard. Like I would have to be fighting with myself the whole time
Yeah.
if I'm doing
It's
that. And this
not.
is why I think that I do struggle with your traditional corporate structure because
Yeah.
I don't really want to do that, which is a struggle because if you have big dreams and big ambitions, you kind of have to mold yourself to be this version that people want to see from
Yeah.
you. And
It's
it's a
it's
hard
not.
thing to navigate
It
for
is.
me.
It is. I'm not gonna sit up here and be like, oh, what? Like, it's hard because you pretty much have to make a decision that the person and the business person, they coexist, but they're different, which in turns means that you have to turn this on and off and on.
Well, it's almost like playing a role, like you're acting, but in real
Yeah,
life. You know,
yeah,
you're like Lady Gaga.
yeah,
You heard of her in that
yeah.
movie, like the Gucci
Lady
movie?
Gaga versus Stephanie.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
no. Have you seen that movie, the one where she plays like the Gucci, the House of Gucci? Have you seen that movie?
Oh,
She
yeah.
apparently she had like adapted like an Italian accent and she lived with the Italian accent for like months to prepare for this role. She was
Wow.
Patrizia Gucci.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
she would
Patricia.
speak to her friends and family in that accent because she
Wow.
embodied that role
Adi,
and
yeah.
the commitment that you have to have. But like that was like a short thing. She
Yeah,
didn't have to do
no.
that for the until the movie comes out. But
Elizabeth had committed herself to all black, turtleneck, red lips,
deep voice.
and speaking like this.
Oh my god, that's so scary.
And speaking like this. And, first they think you're crazy, and then you change the world.
I'm obsessed.
Like, it's
I
like,
can't.
it's just like when you hear audio of her
Okay,
speaking,
but
and then people that went to high school with her, and they're like, of course she
is it
doesn't
just
sound like
is
that.
it is it just me or does Saleh sound really great with a lower voice?
No, 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 no. I'm, I'm just gonna stay here. I'm gonna stay at this pitch here. It's
I immediately am sold to whatever you're gonna sell me though. So when you
see,
use,
I
I'm
need to
like,
go invest in turtlenecks. And she had this super unhealthy obsession with Steve Jobs.
yes. I mean, they all
Super,
kind of do though, to be honest. Like
we
every startup, like yeah,
right?
every
Like
startup.
if you're a creative, right? He is at the top of
Yeah,
people that took something that was on life support and completely turned it
yeah,
around with
that's
one invention.
phenomenal.
Phenomenal, right? But it's like she fixated in a different way, like almost like she wanted to be there side by side with him,
Yeah,
side by
she
side with
wanted to be him,
him,
essentially. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So the
So
turtleneck
wild.
thing wasn't accidental. It was, and that's the thing, like that we learn later, nothing was accidental.
Yeah.
She was incredibly strategic in all of her move. I think all the way down to the relationship with Sunny Balwani.
You think
She
so?
knew
Well, yeah.
she
Well,
knew I mean, she's claiming in the trial how he manipulated her and he did this and he did that and he was the Sunny.
we'll get to all that. We'll get to all
Okay, go ahead.
that. Okay. So now that we can kind of maybe calm down a little bit from everything and let's focus on some of the heroes of the story real quick. So
Yes.
Mr. John Carreyrou, he is the reporter that broke the story about Theranos for the Wall Street Journal, and he also wrote a book called Bad Blood. He is a phenomenal investigative reporter.
Yeah.
He's won multiple Pulitzer Prizes before, and he's just a phenomenal guy.
Yeah.
But essentially, this is the origin of the article. This is what he says. He said that, quote, I got a tip from a pathologist in the Midwest who moonlighted as a writer of a blog called the Pathology Blog, and it's BLAWG.
Oh.
So dirty. The Pathology
It's like
Blog.
I can appreciate a very nerdy title.
So this man who writes for the blog, he read a profile of Elizabeth Holmes in the New Yorker and was immediately dubious about the claims that she made in that story about her technology's ability to test tiny blood samples to run so many tests on a tiny blood sample. He wrote a short skeptical item on his blog and was contacted by someone who had been involved with patent litigations with Elizabeth Holmes. This person then became suspicious that Theranos was a scam and then made contact with a Theranos employee and then eventually reached a former lab director. The employee was alleging all manners of wrongdoing. So then John was able to get in contact with the informant, and that was how it all started. But it all started with this random blog, and then it expanded into this big story. So essentially he talked to the lab director, then the people who worked there, and was able to start that whole story. But some of the whistleblowers that I do want to give mentions to, one of them is Taylor Schultz. He was a Stanford student when he met Holmes, and he is the grandson of George Schultz. Tyler worked countless hours in the labs and was then realizing that the Edison machine wasn't really all that special. And so when he discovered this, he realizes that there was a lot of things that was fishy in the company, and essentially contacted state regulators in New York using an alias. And then he worked with John Carreyrou to reveal all the shortcomings of Theranos.
And he had family. He had blood in this.
He had blood in this. And if you listen to the podcast, his father was actually, I was re-listening to it. It was so wild. His father was on his knees begging Taylor to not go forward with this story.
Yeah.
That was how intense it was. And he really described what a rough time it was for him. Yeah. And right now, actually, he's running his own biotech startup focused on women's fertility issues. He is pitching investors and making grand promises. He says, I'm under pressure to exaggerate technology claims, exaggerate revenue projection claims. Sometimes investors will straight up tell you need to double, quadruple, or 10 times any revenue projections you think is realistic. In a weird twist, the experience has made him comparing himself to his now notorious former boss. I could see how this environment could create an Elizabeth Holmes, he said. So he's a very empathetic person.
He's a very empathetic person. And I think he's one of the people I remember the most because of the family, that his grandfather, his father, that's a stand-up human to me.
Yeah,
like
100%.
when you show up like that for people you don't know, like he owed the people of Arizona and everywhere else Theranos was, he owed them nothing except he chose to be a good human being and put an end to a low-key sociopath.
Something that he knew was wrong.
He knew it was wrong and knew that something needed to be done about it, and he went for it.
Erica Chung was the other whistleblower, and she's the other key whistleblower. So she graduated from UC Berkeley with dual degree in cellular molecular biology and linguistics. She actually had a TED Talk all about speaking truth to power, and she whistled internally and she blew the whistle internally and externally. She also whistles for fun.
I love it. You go and you whistle, girl. We are so thankful that you whistled internally and externally. We are so thankful you did.
But she actually initially wrote an email to Balwani and George Schultz, and was found that they were very unresponsive or unreceptive to her concerns. And even Balwani questioned her, why she's even bothering him about this. And so that's when she went to the regulators, and then also went to John Carreyrou as well. She is now actually, she's worked in startups for the most part, but she actually started an ethics and entrepreneurship, an organization that focuses on promoting ethical behaviors among startup founders. So another really amazing person.
That's another amazing human. And she shares stories about being followed, cease and desist orders. They went after her like in a really, really scary, scary way. I'm glad that it's working. It's doing better than just working out for both her and Tyler, because their stories, my God.
Yeah, they're true heroes of this story. Really meanwhile, as chaos ensues, freaking Miss Elizabeth Holmes out here is like going to Burning Man and stuff. Like, she's like living a normal life, which is what is also shocking to
man.
Me. She got a pretty good-looking man, actually,
and a pretty rich man.
Yes, he's rich and he's younger and he's obsessed with her. What the heck? Bad things happen, or good things happen to bad people, I tell you.
Like, make it make sense. Make it make sense.
But essentially, while she's going through like the downfall of Theranos, she met her husband at a charity function. Like, why is she being invited to charity function? Like, what the heck? Where's my invitation?
Her net worth is 0. She got nothing to donate you. Stop inviting.
I know. She has nothing to give. He is roughly 10 years younger than her. And basically he says, to say we immediately fell in love isn't an overstatement.
Vomatrocious. Vomatrocious.
In 2018, they were seen partying at Burning Man, essentially living a normal life. There was actually an account on the podcast The Dropout where an ex-employee saw Holmes at a restaurant. She walked up to this person and was like acting like nothing happened. And after the exchange, the former employee was noticeably shaking because he was absolutely terrified. I mean, this woman terrified people to their core. It's so wild.
The makings of a sociopath.
I mean, I think she was already one.
She was, right? But like, how can you face people after that? Like, if I was her, I go into complete and total darkness for a little while and hope that the world's forgotten about my atrocities for maybe 5 minutes before I can go to Whole Foods again. Like, I just don't exist. I allowed the world to process whatever they're processing, but she was like, ow, she's getting a man, a rich man, an heir to an empire.
I don't want to think about it because it makes me sad. Maybe if I dressed more like Elizabeth Holmes, attractive rich empire man. But in June of 2018, Holmes and Balwani both indicted on criminal fraud charges, and neither pled guilty, of course. Like, of course they wouldn't, you know?
Surprise!
2019, Holmes married. And then in 2020, her criminal trial was delayed because of the pandemic. And then she was then found pregnant. So then it was delayed again. She ends up having 2 children with this man. And there was this whole thing about them buying like a ticket to Mexico. And the judge really thought that she was trying to like escape. But she was like, oh no, we just bought the tickets because we thought that I was not going to get evicted and we were just going to go down there to celebrate. You know how things go, you know how things are, Judge. I wasn't going to run away. Are you kidding? No, I was going to stay here forever.
If delusional was a person, she's sitting in the dictionary next to the word delusional like this.
That's all you needed to know. Mom, Dad, what's delusional? Here.
Like
this thing.
Elizabeth Holmes sitting in there like this.
No, she's like this. With her files. She's holding up her files.
She's holding her little tingies right next to delusional.
Oh my God. Okay.
We're awful. We're gonna get hate mail from Elizabeth Holmes fans.
Oh my gosh, what if she does reach out to us? That would be kind of fun.
I'm gonna be like, Are you
You're like, you don't know to feel happy or sad.
are sad? I don't know. She'll
um,
appreciate your whole get up though.
yes, we appreciate. Yeah, never mind. We don't appreciate anything. Okay. Holmes was found guilty on 4 of 11 federal charges, and she was later sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in prison for defrauding investors in the failed Silicon Valley startup that sought to revolutionize blood testing, which is sad. I mean,
Yeah.
really, like if it did work out, it would have been phenomenal. It,
And that's I
you
think
know,
the lost of all losses
yeah,
in this situation. She had an idea and a vision for something that if she was transparent, she could have found people in the scientific community that would have been willing to work and develop this
yeah.
idea and bring it into fruition.
But
But
there are,
this is not the creation of TikTok or Instagram or Facebook. Like this is not the creation of a social media platform.
mm-hmm,
This is a healthcare technology. It can't work 99% of the time. It has to work. It has to work and
but
work in such a way that the people who are using it, the people who are going to need it, the people that are interpreting it, that we know it works. And for her to just be out here on some,
yeah, it's sad because there are technology coming out now that it's kind of similar to what she wants to do. We got
yeah,
those continuous glucose monitoring
yes,
technology now.
yes,
We do test INRs with finger sticks now. Sometimes
yes,
there's a lot of things that, had she maybe calm down a bit and
yeah,
look at things on a more practical level. Maybe you don't do one drop of blood with 30 tests. Maybe you start
yeah,
with one or two
yeah,
and then you expand.
yeah.
But I'm not saying like her idea was completely crazy or that she's completely out,
She didn't.
out of her mind. I think that like
Mm.
had someone just kind of like reined her in a little bit and talk some sense into her.
She needed to listen to the scientist.
Yeah.
That's all she needed. You don't have scientific background. Sunny doesn't have scientific background. You needed to hire someone who actually knew the science, someone
Yeah.
who understood the science, someone who could talk to and work with the lab and they're speaking in the same language. Not Sunny coming around as the enforcer and talking to
Yeah.
the lab and sending people threatening emails because they're collaborating cross-functionally
Yeah.
because they're like, hey, this is not making sense. But she needed good, hardworking scientists and she needed expert support. And it's the thing that, like Jay-Z talks about it a lot. Like, he doesn't know how to do everything. He's not brilliant at everything. But part of his success has been knowing when to hire the people that are
Yeah.
good at doing the thing that he needs to make the extra 100 million, the extra 200 million. And I think that it's a real lesson for all of us that are entrepreneurs. Like we talk about it, we joke about it. Like I'm the lawyer, I'm the marketer, I'm the visual digital creator.
Of
We are
everything.
like 10 people's jobs in one, but that's because we're limited on funding, on resources and everything else. She didn't have that.
Yeah.
She's on the cover of Forbes with the network in B as in boy.
Yeah.
She could have hired any expert.
It's so hard though too because when you have an idea and you're like I'm going to go do this and then when people talk you out of it,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
hard because if
It's hard.
you actually want things to go the way that you envision them, sometimes you have to ignore the naysayers. And I can imagine
Absolutely.
if somebody goes to Elizabeth and it's like, Elizabeth, your idea doesn't work. And if
Mhm.
that's all you say to Elizabeth, I can imagine
Yeah.
she being like, well, then you're fired.
Yeah.
Maybe someone should have come and said, this doesn't work, but maybe we could try it this way first. And then maybe like give her a better way to navigate through what she wants
Yeah.
to do. But I think,
Yeah.
but that's the problem with scientists and people in healthcare. Like, I mean, some of our pharmacy colleagues that I'll be like, let's do this. And they immediately be like, no, that doesn't
No,
work.
that doesn't work.
And so then you're like, okay, but I think it will.
I think it will,
So
right?
there's a balance and it's yeah, we can kind of understand that completely.
We can
So
understand that. So, like, case in point, I am going to be going to APHA in a week or so, right? I am presenting an idea in Farm Tank, which is like Shark
well, how
Tank,
fun. I didn't know that they
right?
had that. Yeah.
I am petrified. Full disclosure,
Be scared.
I am petrified. But I talked to several people about this idea that has been accepted, and they all told me like it wouldn't work. It's what? No, that's not gonna work. That's not gonna work. But I'm solution driven. I know that this idea is going to solve a problem. I didn't drop it. I didn't drop it. And I have an opportunity now to present it in a room full of people that have business acumen like I don't. And they can hopefully give me feedback to help me continue to develop the idea. Right. But I think that I'm way too hard headed to be turned away at the first no. So I think that professor at Stanford saying no to her probably emboldened Elizabeth.
Yeah, when it comes to entrepreneurs who are coming to you, it's really fascinating because if you go to another entrepreneur, they will say, your idea might work, but think about this or think about that or
Yeah,
whatever.
that's
But if
the
you go to
best.
somebody, if you go to somebody who's not really, who
An
don't have an
entrepreneur.
entrepreneur
Yeah.
mindset, they'll be like, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Done.
She's an academic.
Yeah,
She's thinking with her research hat
exactly.
on and her scientist hat on, this can't work. And she's like, but this is the business. This is an idea. This can change the world. And
Yeah,
I see it. And I think there's a path forward there.
yeah,
And it's true, like she's being studied, she's being talked about in business courses and business schools and stuff like that, because there's a lot to learn in what
yeah.
she did, all of what she did, all of what she did, the awful, the ugly, the disgusting, the psychopathic stuff. There's stuff to learn from her. She was psycho. She's also in the
A
dictionary
genius.
like this, in psycho like next to psycho like this.
You
Wait,
know what's really funny is because I make all the thumbnails for our YouTube videos. I'm like,
oh,
oh, we have so many good thumbnails for this episode. I can't
oh
wait.
my
I'm just gonna
God.
put like little
If I
nanotators in all of
if
our
I
fingers.
surface like this, I'm going to die.
This is how I work sometimes. I'm like, as we're filming it, I'm like, that's a perfect thumbnail. Oh, that's a good one too.
I'm done.
But
Oh,
oh man, we can go on forever about this. I mean, I think it's been a pretty long episode already, so
okay.
I think we got to wrap it up. But there's so much to talk about in terms of
There's so
entrepreneurship,
much to talk.
and
And
I'm so excited to
we would love for you guys to talk to us about
love
it in the comments, in the chat, direct message us. You know, we're open to it.
the whole thing.
I'm open to all of it. My position on Elizabeth Holmes is pretty well known. Like people who know me know. I acknowledge the ugly, the bad, but I can't deny and lie that before I bought that Forbes magazine, the only Forbes magazine ever,
I didn't
it was
realize you
her.
bought it.
I,
Do you have
before
it
that,
hanging in your house?
it stopped me in my tracks. Like it really did.
Yeah,
It was like a moment I remember so vividly because of the cover and because of what I saw. And I
yeah,
was just like, what? This is crazy. And like I wanted to read about it and learn more about her from that moment on.
yeah.
And then for that to completely now turn into the story that I know is what it is now today, I keep her in my head because whenever I get overly ambitious and the unethical seems like the easy path forward, girl, remember Elizabeth Holmes?
Yeah, I love that actually. If the unethical is the easy path forward, yeah, that's
Yeah,
very true.
it's
You know
it's
what's so wild? As I was actually, oh my gosh, okay, this episode might be 6 hours long. I'm sorry, guys. It's okay. It is what it is. But
it's
when I was doing this episode, I was thinking about even what we're doing and growing our podcast and our show and our listenership through social media. I
yeah,
realized that like people on social media, I mean, I always know social media is fake, but I also realized like, oh God, like you can buy subscribers, like you can boost your
yeah.
posts and make it look like you're growing exponentially. And
Actually, yeah,
you can do a lot of things to show people like what you want them to see. And
that's true.
it's I don't know. I personally don't think it's unethical because it's just part of the game nowadays. But I also want people who are at home, like if you want to do your own social media thing or you want to grow whatever and you see other people growing so fast and you're like, why can't I be like that? Realize that they are using certain things that you're not seeing. And it's part of the business, unfortunately, but just be aware of it. Like,
keep it in mind.
You know, but I don't think that's unethical. I'm just saying that like there are a lot easier ways to do things.
Yeah. Just resist the urge to compare yourself. Resist it so bad. Like I share my numbers because I've shared my numbers from when I only had 6 people enroll with me in the match cycle. Then I shared when I went to 13. And so people know that to share where I am now, the people that have been following me from the beginning, they know that this thing was built from the ground up because I started with 6 people trusting me to help them through, right? But hold on, just don't compare yourself. You're on a journey. This thing is a journey. And if next year I only enroll 40 people, I will give those 40 people my absolute best all the same.
My gosh, 40 is a lot of people already.
Huh?
40 is a lot for you, for me, for right? One person.
It's a one person business, one person entity still. So like to Thu's point, people are using a lot of different technologies. And like I say, get it how you live. If that's what you want to do that. But if you're sitting there, you don't have the money to boost the post, you don't have the money to buy subscribers and followers, you don't have the money, but you believe in what you're doing, and just grow. Just focus on that, period.
And with that said, thank you so much for listening. If this episode speaks to you and you think others may benefit from hearing our stories, please send this episode to them. This is going to help us reach even more people.
Yes, we are available. This episode, and I think 13 others, can you believe it, are available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast. Please connect with us on the social, and Thu's gonna link our personals as well as the show's podcast links below for you to find us.
Linking everything,
with
baby.
Us, like, share. We love to hear from you, but the only way other people can discover us as we continue to build this community through storytelling and sharing what we're learning and how we feel about what's going on is if you share and let other people know. And to do that, we need your help. Please review the podcast. Please review and rate us so that we become discoverable for other people that are interested in similar content. Until next time, everybody, please don't you forget it. We got
this.
Bye everybody.